The Duke returned on the day his wife was being forced to become another man's bride. He arrived too late for the first prayer, too late for the whispered objections, too late to see Lady Seraphina Ashcombe standing at the front of the village chapel, with her hands locked so tightly around a wilted bouquet that the stems had snapped in her fingers. But he arrived before the vows, and that was enough to ruin everything. The chapel doors opened with a crash that silenced the priest mid-sentence. Every head turned. Rain blew in behind him. A tall man stood in the doorway wearing a black traveling coat, mud on his boots, and the face of a ghost that half the county had buried 3 years ago. Gasps moved through the pews like wind through dry leaves. Someone whispered, "Impossible." Someone else whispered, "The Duke." At the altar, Seraphina went white. Beside her, Lord Bramwell Huxley tightened his grip on her arm. And halfway down the aisle, a little boy stood from the front pew. He was 5 years old. Dark-haired, pale-faced, too still for a child. He had been sitting beside the old housekeeper, Mrs. Lark, with a wooden horse clutched in one hand and a hatred in his eyes that no child should have learned so young. The Duke saw the boy saw the Duke, and the whole chapel held its breath, because the child had his face, not a resemblance, not a rumor made visible. His face, the same black brows, the same sharp cheekbones, the same grey eyes that had made generations of Ashcombe portraits look as if they were judging the living. Seraphina took one step forward. Edmund, the name broke in her mouth. Edmund Ashcombe, Duke of Hawthorne, moved down the aisle as if the room did not exist around him. His eyes were fixed only on his wife. His wife. Still his wife. Despite the black dress they had made her wear for mourning, despite the letters that told the county he was dead, despite the marriage contract lying open beside the altar, waiting to hand her and her small inheritance to Lord Huxley before the ink of false grief had dried. Edmund stopped before the altar. His voice was rough from travel and disuse. "Step away from her." Lord Huxley recovered first. He was a handsome man, in the way polished knives are handsome. Bright, cold, made to cut. His wedding coat was silver grey, his smile too calm for a man whose bride's dead husband had just walked into the church. "Your Grace," he said, "this is a remarkable misunderstanding." Edmund did not look at him. "Remove your hand from my wife." Seraphina flinched at the word wife. Huxley's fingers left her arm. Edmund looked down at the marriage paper, then at the priest. "Has she spoken the vow?" The old priest swallowed. "No, Your Grace." "Then there is no marriage." The little boy stepped into the aisle. "There is no father either." The words struck harder than the thunder outside. Edmund turned. The child's small face was rigid with fury. He held the wooden horse like a weapon, though his hands trembled around it. Seraphina whispered, "Julian, no!" But the boy did not look at her. He looked only at Edmund. "You cannot come here and say wife," Julian said. "You cannot say mine. You cannot say anything. Dead men do not get to come back and take people." The chapel went silent. Edmund's face changed. Just slightly. It was the first time anyone saw the blow land. "What is your name?" he asked. The boy lifted his chin. "Julian Vale. Not Ashcombe. Not Hawthorne. Vale. Seraphina's mother's name. A safe name. A hidden name." Edmund's throat tightened. "How old are you?" "Old enough to know when someone does not come home." "Julian," Seraphina said softly. "No." The boy's voice shook now, but he did not stop. "He does not get to look at you like that. He does not get to stand there and make you cry. He does not get to be my father, because fathers stay." A woman in the third pew began to weep. Edmund stood as still as stone. 3 years ago, he had left Hawthorne Abbey for what was meant to be a month of crown business in France. Then the channel closed under political unrest. Then a fever swept through the convoy. Then he was attacked outside Calais and left for dead with no papers, no ring, no name recognized by the Fisher family, who found him barely breathing on the coast. For nearly 2 years, he had known nothing of himself except pain, fragments, and the face of a woman with amber eyes who appeared in fever dreams and vanished when he woke. His memory returned slowly. His title first. His house. His wife. Serafina. He had written as soon as he could hold a pen. No answer came. He wrote again. Nothing. Then word reached him through an English merchant that the Duchess of Hawthorne had entered mourning and was soon to marry Lord Bramwell Huxley, cousin to the late Duke's steward and creditor to half the estate. Edmund rode for 6 days and nights to reach this chapel. He had prepared for his wife's shock, her anger, even her hatred. He had not prepared for a son. He had not prepared for a child who wore his face and rejected his blood before the whole county. Serafina moved toward Julian, but Huxley's voice cut in. "My dear Duchess, this is clearly too much for you. The boy is upset. The man before us may resemble the Duke, but resemblance is not proof." Edmund's eyes turned to him at last. "Careful." Huxley smiled. "You vanished for 3 years, sir. A body was identified. Legal mourning was observed. The estate was managed. Papers were filed. A woman cannot be expected to remain chained to a ghost. Yet someone was eager to chain her to you." Huxley's smile thinned. Serafina looked between them. "What do you mean a body was identified?" Edmund's gaze returned to her. The chapel vanished around them. "You believed I was dead?" She stared at him. "You were declared dead. By whom?" Her lips parted. She looked slowly toward Huxley. He spread his hands. "By officials, by reports, by necessity. Your Grace, do not allow confusion to become accusation." Julian stepped closer to Serafina. "You said he chose not to come." Edmund looked at the boy. "What?" Julian's eyes flashed. "Mama wrote letters." She cried when they came back. "Then Lord Huxley said you were alive but had refused to return. Then he said you died. Then he said men like you always leave twice." Serafina closed her eyes. The chapel shifted again. This time, it was not shock. It was suspicion. Edmund looked at his wife, and for the first time he saw beyond the wedding veil someone had forced into her hair. She was exhausted, not merely frightened, worn down. She had the look of a woman who had fought until fighting became expensive, then learned to save her strength for the child standing beside her. "Serafina," he said quietly, "did you receive my letters?" Her face crumpled before she could stop it. "No." The answer was barely a whisper. "I received none from you." "I sent them." "So did I." A low murmur broke through the chapel. Huxley turned sharply. "This is sentimental nonsense. The woman is distressed. The child is confused. This man appears dramatically and expects us to overturn lawful arrangements because he claims to be—" Edmund took one step toward him. Huxley stopped speaking. "I claim nothing," Edmund said. "I am Edmund Ashcombe, Duke of Hawthorne. I have scars from the Calais Road. I have my mother's prayer medal hidden inside my boot because the thieves missed it. I know the private name my wife gave the West Library because the fire smoked too badly in winter. And I know you are standing too confidently beside papers that should never have been drawn." Huxley's face changed, only for a second. But Edmund saw it. So did Serafina. Julian saw something else. He saw his mother sway. At once, the boy dropped the wooden horse and grabbed her hand. "Mama? I am all right." "No, you are not." He turned on Edmund with sudden fury. "Go away!" Serafina gasped softly. Edmund did not move. Julian pointed toward the door. "You made everyone whisper. You made Lord Huxley angry. You made Mama look like she is going to break. Go away." Edmund's voice came low. "I cannot." "You can. You did before." That silenced him. There are accusations a man can defend himself against, and there are truths he must accept before speaking. Edmund bowed his head slightly. "You are right." The boy blinked, disarmed for half a second. Edmund continued, "I did leave, not by choice as long as you believe, but long enough that your mother suffered, long enough that you learned to stand between her and the world. I will not ask you to call me father today." Julian's grip tightened around Serafina's hand. "Never. Pain crossed Edmund's face. He accepted that too. Then not today, but I will not let this wedding continue. Huxley laughed. You do not decide that. Serafina lifted her head. I do. Every eye turned. Her voice shook, but it held. I will not marry Lord Huxley. Huxley went still. Serafina. She removed the veil from her hair and let it fall at his feet. I will not marry any man today. The old priest looked relieved enough to faint. Edmund stepped back, giving her space. That mattered. Serafina saw it. Julian saw it too, though he pretended not to. Huxley's face hardened. You will regret this. Edmund's voice dropped. She will not be threatened in a chapel. Huxley smiled coldly. This is not over. No, Edmund said. It is only beginning. The storm outside broke fully as Lord Huxley strode from the church. Guests scattered into whispers. Mrs. Lark gathered Julian close, but the boy refused to let go of his mother's hand. Serafina stood beneath the altar flowers, still pale, still breathing too quickly, no longer a bride, and not yet safe. Edmund looked at her. I came to claim my wife, he said. Her eyes filled. And found a son who will not claim you. He looked at Julian. The boy stared back with open defiance. Yes, Edmund said quietly. So I will begin there. Edmund was not allowed inside Hawthorne Abbey that night. Julian stood at the front door with Mrs. Lark behind him and barred the threshold with the same wooden sword he had carried at the chapel. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of storm. Serafina stood on the first step, wrapped in a dark cloak, her face pale beneath the carriage lantern. Julian, she said softly, His Grace cannot sleep in the yard. He can sleep at the inn. Mrs. Lark coughed into her hand. Edmund, standing below the steps, said nothing. A duke had many powers. Forcing his way past a wounded child was not one he intended to use. Julian lifted the sword. Mama lives here. I live here. Mrs. Lark lives here. He does not. Serafina closed her eyes briefly. He is the Duke of Hawthorne. He can be Duke outside. Edmund almost smiled. Almost. But Julian's face was too serious for amusement. Serafina looked at Edmund. I am sorry. Do not be. You own this house. He looked toward the great stone abbey, rising dark against the evening sky. No, he said. I inherited it. That is not the same as belonging. Julian frowned, as if the answer had made him unwillingly curious. Edmund turned to Mrs. Lark. Is the old gamekeeper's cottage still standing near the east wood? The housekeeper stared. Yes, Your Grace, but it has not been used in years. Have someone take blankets there. Serafina stepped down one stair. Edmund, it is damp and cold. Then I will understand something of what I missed. She looked away. Julian lowered the sword by an inch. Not forgiveness, only confusion. That night, Edmund slept in the gamekeeper's cottage, beneath a leaking roof, with damp logs refusing to burn, and the scent of old moss in the walls. He did not sleep much. At dawn, he woke to hoofbeats. When he opened the door, Julian stood outside with a basket on the ground. The boy wore his little coat, boots muddy, sword tucked beneath one arm. Edmund looked behind him. No servant. No Mrs. Lark. No Serafina. You came alone. Julian lifted his chin. I know the path. That does not answer my question. I brought bread. Edmund looked at the basket. From your mother? No. Mrs. Lark? No. Then why? Julian frowned as if the matter irritated him. Mama said no one should freeze hungry, even when he deserves the cold. Edmund's throat tightened. I see. She did not tell me to bring it. Then thank you. I did not bring it for you. No, I brought it because if you die again, everyone will cry again, and I dislike crying. Edmund nodded solemnly. A practical kindness, then. Julian seemed to approve of that phrase. Yes. He turned to go. Julian. The boy stopped. May I walk you back? No. May I follow at a distance and pretend I am not? Julian considered this. At a large distance. How large? Far enough that I cannot hear your boots. Edmund obeyed. He followed his son through the wet morning woods, stepping carefully over roots and fallen branches. Julian never looked back, but once he slowed when Edmund nearly slipped near the stream. At the edge of the Abbey garden, the boy turned. You walk badly for a duke. I have been told worse. Mamma walks quietly. She always did. Julian's eyes sharpened. You remember her? Yes. Then why did you make her sad? Edmund did not answer quickly. The boy waited. That was the trouble with children. They did not allow polite escapes. I believed a lie, Edmund said at last, and then I was trapped far away longer than I should have been. What lie? That she did not want me home. Julian's face hardened. That is stupid. Yes. Mama waited at the west window every Thursday for 2 years. Edmund stopped breathing. Julian looked toward the house. She said Thursday was letter day. Then she said letters get lost. Then she said some silences are not answers. Then one day she stopped waiting at the window and started working in the estate office. The blow landed slowly. Every Thursday. While he fought fever. While he wandered under another name. While his letters disappeared. And before that, perhaps, while pride and confusion had already started the ruin. Did Lord Huxley come then? Julian nodded. He brought papers. He smiled at Mamma like she was a thing on a shelf. Edmund's hands curled at his sides. Did he frighten you? The boy looked offended. No. Then, after a pause, sometimes. Thank you for telling me. I did not tell you for your sake. No. Still, thank you. Julian ran toward the house before he could be thanked again. Inside Hawthorne Abbey, Seraphina sat in the morning room, surrounded by letters that had been returned, redirected, or never opened. Some were hers. Some were Edmund's. Some were forgeries. Edmund stood across from her, wet from the woods, while Mrs. Lark placed more papers on the table, with the grim satisfaction of a woman who had waited years to empty a locked drawer. Seraphina touched one envelope, bearing Edmund's crest. I never saw this. I sent it from Calais after the fever broke. It says undeliverable. I had addressed it correctly. Mrs. Lark cleared her throat. Not by the time it reached here, Your Grace. Edmund looked at her. What do you mean? The housekeeper removed a torn label. Someone pasted a new direction over the original. I found 3 like this in the old steward's fire basket years ago. I saved what I could. Seraphina's face changed. The old steward. Mr. Cale, Edmund said. Mrs. Lark nodded. Huxley's man before he came to us. Silence followed. The shape of the betrayal grew clearer. Lord Huxley had not simply waited for Edmund's disappearance. He had prepared to profit from it. Seraphina opened one of her own letters, returned unopened. Her voice shook as she read. Edmund, our son was born before dawn. He has your eyes. I am angry with you, and terrified, and tired beyond sense. But if there is mercy left between us, come home. Edmund turned away. Seraphina's voice broke. I wrote that when I was too weak to sit up. I did not receive it. I know that now. But knowing did not remove the years. It only gave them a culprit. That afternoon, Edmund rode to the estate office. Mr. Cale was gone. Huxley had removed him the week before the false wedding and sent him to the southern farms on urgent business. The office shelves had been cleared too neatly. Ledgers were missing. Several rent rolls had been recopied in unfamiliar handwriting. Edmund stood in the room he had once governed and saw how completely absence had invited occupation. His steward, Briggs, an older man loyal to the Ashcombe line, returned near sunset after receiving word of the Duke's survival. He came straight to the cottage, not the Abbey. That told Edmund enough. Your Grace, Briggs said, bowing with visible emotion. Tell me what Huxley has taken. Briggs's face hardened. Nearly everything he could touch without being obvious. Start with the letters. He controlled the post through Cale, said her Grace was not to be troubled with distressing matters while she mourned. She was not mourning at first. No, but he was preparing the story before the county heard it. Edmund leaned against the rough cottage table. And my death? Briggs drew a folded paper from his coat. The declaration came from France, signed by a military clerk who has since vanished. Bought? Likely. And the body? Identified by ring and papers. My ring was stolen. Yes. Edmund closed his eyes briefly. Briggs continued. There is more. There always is. Huxley's marriage contract included management rights over Lady Seraphina's dower farms and temporary guardianship influence over Lord Julian's education. Edmund's eyes opened. He meant to control the boy. He meant to control the future Duke. A dark quiet filled the cottage. Then a small voice came from the half-open door. I knew he was bad. Julian stood outside, rainwater dripping from his hair. Edmund straightened. You should not listen at doors. The boy stepped inside. You do. Briggs coughed violently to hide something that might have been a laugh. Edmund accepted defeat. How long have you been there? Since Mr. Briggs said Huxley took everything. This is adult business. It is my future dukedom. Edmund stared at him. Julian looked back stubbornly. Seraphina had clearly taught him survival. The house had taught him suspicion. His blood had given him nerve. What do you know about Lord Huxley? Edmund asked. The boy came farther in. He visits the nursery when Mama is with tenants. Edmund's body went still. What does he say? Julian's face darkened. That dukes must be trained early. That Mama is too soft. That one day I will thank him for teaching me obedience. Edmund kept his voice steady with effort. Did he hurt you? No. Briggs looked unconvinced. Julian lifted his chin. He tried to take my wooden horse once. I bit him. Briggs turned away. This time, he did laugh. Edmund did not. Did you tell your mother? She had enough troubles. The answer was so small and so old that it cut the room open. Edmund crouched, slowly, so the boy could step back if he wished. Julian did not. You are not responsible for protecting your mother from the truth. Yes, I am. No, you are a child. I am the only man who stayed. The words destroyed him. Edmund had no defense against them. He bowed his head. You are right. Julian looked startled. Adults, perhaps, had not often surrendered ground to him. Edmund looked up. But I am here now. If you do not wish to claim me as father, I will not force it, but allow me to stand guard beside you. Julian stared at him for a long time. Then he said, beside, not in front. Beside, Edmund agreed. The boy nodded once. A treaty. Small, fragile, but real. 3 days later, Edmund returned to Hawthorne Abbey properly. Not to claim his room, not to take the head of the table, to attend the council Lord Huxley had called before he learned the Duke was alive. Huxley arrived expecting frightened servants, a cornered widow, and a child he could reshape. Instead, he found Edmund seated at the long library table, Seraphina beside him, Julian standing between them with his wooden horse in one hand and his sword in the other. Huxley stopped in the doorway. Edmund smiled without warmth. Come in, Lord Huxley. We have been waiting. Lord Huxley recovered quickly. Men like him always did. A lesser villain might have turned pale, stammered, or fled the moment he saw the Duke seated alive at his own library table. Huxley only smiled. Your Grace, he said. How fortunate. I had hoped we might speak privately. Edmund leaned back slightly. I prefer witnesses. The library held several. Seraphina sat at Edmund's right, no longer veiled, no longer dressed for a wedding she despised. Her gown was dark green, simple and steady, chosen by her own hand that morning. Julian stood beside her chair. Mrs. Lark was near the fire. Briggs stood by the ledgers. The old village priest sat near the window, looking uneasy but resolute. Mr. Alden, Edmund's solicitor from York, had arrived before dawn, and now watched Lord Huxley over a pair of silver spectacles. Huxley glanced at each of them. A family ambush! How dramatic! No, Seraphina said. A family correction. His eyes flickered toward her. My dear Duchess, one should be careful when speaking in distress. Julian lifted his wooden sword. She is not your dear anything. Huxley's mouth tightened. Edmund's voice remained calm. Address my son with respect. The word son filled the room. Julian's grip on the sword shifted. He did not look at Edmund, but he heard it. Huxley heard it too. Your son, he said lightly. Yes, I suppose that is now the preferred position. Edmund's eyes cooled. The only position. Mr. Alden opened the first folder. Let us begin with the death declaration. Huxley sighed. Must we? The county has already endured enough confusion. The county will endure accuracy. Briggs placed a copy on the table. Edmund looked at Huxley. This document declared me dead, based on the identification of a body near Calais. A tragic misunderstanding. The body wore my stolen ring, a common enough theft during unrest, and carried papers from my inner coat pocket. Huxley spread his hands. Again thieves. Mr. Alden spoke. Curious thieves. They stole His Grace's papers, placed them on another dead man, and somehow the declaration reached your associate, Mr. Cale, before it reached the Duchess. Huxley's smile thinned. I cannot answer for the habits of French officials. No, Edmund said, but you can answer for Cale. The door opened. Mr. Cale entered under the watch of 2 estate men. His face was grey. Huxley went very still. Cale had the look of a man who had spent the night deciding whether loyalty was worth prison, and concluded it was not. Edmund gestured to the empty chair. Sit. Cale sat. Huxley laughed once. This is absurd. A dismissed steward hoping to save himself by inventing... Cale interrupted. You promised me the Western farm. Silence. Huxley looked at him with pure hatred. Cale swallowed. You promised it in writing. Mr. Alden lifted a paper. And, unfortunately for Lord Huxley, he kept the note. Seraphina closed her eyes briefly. Edmund did not look away from Huxley. Cale continued, voice shaking. I redirected the letters, hers and His Grace's. I gave them to Lord Huxley. Some were burned, some were kept. I pasted false labels. I told Mrs. Lark the returned packets were clerical mistakes. Mrs. Lark made a quiet sound of fury. Julian looked at his mother. You wrote that many? Seraphina touched his hand. Yes. He looked at Edmund. And you? Yes, Edmund said. The boy's face changed. Not forgiveness, but the ground beneath his anger shifted. Huxley stood. This proves nothing beyond a servant's betrayal. Briggs stepped forward. It proves preparation. Mr. Alden opened the second folder. This is the proposed marriage settlement Lord Huxley required Her Grace to sign after the wedding. It grants him influence over Hawthorne Dower Farms, abbey rents, and the education of the minor heir. Huxley smiled coldly. A husband must manage. Seraphina's voice cut through the room. You were not my husband. You nearly corrected that. Against my will. You walked to the altar. Because you told me Edmund had abandoned me, then died. Because you threatened the cottages held under my protection. Because you made my son afraid in his own house. Huxley looked at Julian. The boy stood straighter. I was not afraid. Seraphina looked down at him. Yes, you were. He hesitated, then nodded once. A little. Edmund's chest ached. Huxley's expression shifted into disdain. A tender household. No wonder it fell into disorder. Edmund rose. No dramatic movement. No shout. Just the Duke standing in his own library. The room changed instantly. Hawthorne Abbey did not fall into disorder, he said. It was attacked through forged letters, false death papers, stolen authority, and pressure placed upon a grieving woman and a child. You mistook endurance for weakness. Huxley's smile vanished. Edmund placed one final letter on the table. This was delivered to me last night from France. The military clerk who signed my death declaration has confessed to receiving payment through an English intermediary. Huxley's face hardened. Another purchased witness? No, Edmund said. A frightened one. There is a difference. Mr. Alden added. The intermediary has already been named. Huxley looked toward the door. For the first time, he seemed to consider running. Briggs stood in his way. Julian whispered, "Is he going to prison?" No one answered. Edmund looked at him. "That is for the law." "Good," Julian said. "Then the law should hurry." Despite everything, Seraphina almost smiled. Lord Huxley was removed from Hawthorne Abbey that afternoon. Not dragged, not shouted at. Removed with all the cold dignity Edmund could command, which somehow made the humiliation worse. By evening, the county knew the wedding had been broken, the Duke was alive, and Lord Huxley had departed without his carriage lamps lit, because no servant wished to hold them for him. But victory did not heal a house overnight. That was the part no gossip ever understood. Edmund could expose Huxley in a day. He could not recover 3 stolen years in a week. Seraphina moved back into the Duchess's chamber, but locked the adjoining door between her room and Edmund's. He did not ask for the key. Julian kept his wooden sword near him at all times. When Edmund entered a room, the boy watched him first, then decided whether to remain. That too Edmund accepted. The first change came with the letters. Mr. Alden recovered what Huxley had not burned, 23 of Seraphina's, 19 of Edmund's, and 1 tiny note in crooked handwriting, addressed simply to Papa. Julian denied writing it. The ink on his fingers betrayed him. Edmund waited until the boy was ready. 2 nights later, Julian appeared at the library door. "I wrote it when I was 4. Edmund looked up from the fire. "The note." Julian nodded. "Mrs. Lark helped spell horse. I saw. I asked if you could bring one when you came home." Edmund's voice lowered. "I am sorry I did not receive it." Julian stared at the carpet. "I was angry when you did not answer. You had the right. I thought maybe I had spelled horse too badly." The words nearly broke him. Edmund knelt before the boy, not caring that the servants could see through the half-open door. "No, your spelling was excellent. My absence was not your fault." Julian's mouth trembled. He fought it. Edmund let him. Finally, the boy said, "I still do not claim you. I know. But you may read me your letters." Edmund's throat tightened. "All of them? One at a time. If they are boring, I will stop you. That is fair." From that night on, they read. Not every evening. Some nights Julian refused. Some nights Seraphina came too and sat by the window, pretending to sew, while Edmund read words he had written in fever, fear, hope, and memory. Sometimes she wept silently. Sometimes he had to stop. Sometimes Julian interrupted with questions no adult would dare ask. "Why did you not come faster? Why did you trust the wrong man? Why did Mama have to be brave alone?" Edmund answered every one, even when the answer made him smaller, especially then. Spring deepened. The Abbey gardens bloomed. Seraphina began to sing again, softly at first. So softly Edmund thought he imagined it. Then one morning he passed the music room and heard her voice through the door, warm and low, singing the same lullaby he had once heard from the hall on their wedding night. He did not enter. He stood outside for a moment, closed his eyes, and let the sound exist without trying to possess it. Julian found him there. "You are listening at doors again." Edmund opened his eyes. "I am. That is rude." "Yes." "Are you crying?" "No." Julian leaned closer. "You are." Edmund looked down at him. The boy studied his face, then slipped one small hand into his. Not gently. Not dramatically. As if testing whether it fit. Edmund did not move. Julian looked toward the music room. "She used to sing before you died." "I did not die. You did a little." The answer was painfully true. "Yes," Edmund said. "I suppose I did. She is coming back now. So are you." Julian looked at their joined hands. "I have not claimed you." "No, I am only practicing." Edmund's voice roughened. "Then I will stand very still." By summer, Hawthorne Abbey had changed. The West Library reopened. The tenants whose leases Huxley had threatened received written security. Mrs. Lark was given charge of household correspondence with 2 clerks under her command, and no letter entered or left without proper recording. Cale's testimony helped unravel Huxley's web, though justice moved in its slow, frustrating way. Edmund stayed. That was his greatest act. Not speeches, not gifts, not grand gestures. Staying. He stayed through Julian's anger, through Seraphina's guarded silence, through the awkward breakfasts, through the nights when grief returned because healing is not a straight road. One evening, nearly 6 months after the chapel, Seraphina found him in the nursery, repairing the wooden horse Julian had dropped the day of the interrupted wedding. The horse's leg had cracked. Edmund held it carefully, sanding a small replacement peg. Seraphina stood in the doorway. "He will notice if it is uneven. I know. He will tell you." "I expect nothing less." She came into the room. The sunset filled the nursery with gold. "Edmund?" He looked up. She had not said his name like that since before the disappearance. "Yes? I hated you for surviving somewhere else while I was dying here." He set the toy down. "I know. I hated myself when I learned you had written. You should not." "I know that too. Knowing does not always obey." "No," he said softly. "It does not." She sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Then she picked up the wooden horse and examined the repair. "It is not terrible." A faint smile touched his mouth. High praise. She looked at him. "I do not know how to be your wife again. I do not know how to be worthy of being your husband." "That sounds difficult." "It is." "Good." He almost laughed. She did. A small laugh. A real one. He looked at her as if light had entered the room. That evening, Julian came running in and stopped short at the sight of them sitting side by side. He looked at the horse, then at Edmund. "You fixed it." "I attempted to." Julian inspected the leg. "It wobbles." "I feared so." "It wobbles less than before." "Progress, then." Julian hugged the horse to his chest. Then, without warning, he looked at Edmund and said, "Thank you, Papa." The room went utterly still. Julian seemed to realize what he had said only after saying it. His face reddened. He lifted his chin. "I meant it for practice." Edmund's eyes shone. "Of course." "Do not make a scene." "I would not dare." Seraphina turned her face toward the window, but not before Edmund saw her tears. Months later, when Hawthorne Abbey held its first harvest supper since the Duke's return, the whole county came. Not for scandal this time, for proof that the house had survived. Julian sat between his parents at the high table, wooden horse tucked beside his plate, because he insisted it was part of the family. Near the end of the evening, he stood on his chair. Every conversation stopped. Edmund reached to steady him. Julian allowed it. "I have an announcement," the boy said. Seraphina closed her eyes. Edmund braced himself. Julian lifted his chin. "This is my father." No one breathed. "He was late," Julian added, "very late." A few people covered smiles. "But he is here now. And he fixed the roof over the West Library and my horse, mostly. So I claim him." The hall was silent for half a heartbeat. Then Mrs. Lark began to cry. Seraphina laughed through tears. And Edmund, Duke of Hawthorne, bowed his head before a 5-year-old boy, as if receiving the greatest title of his life. He had returned to claim his wife. But love, he learned, could not be claimed like land, title, or inheritance. It had to be earned. In the end, the first person to give him back his family was not the law, not the county, not even Seraphina. It was the son who had refused him, the son who made him wait, the son who finally decided that a father was not the man who returned with a title, but the man who stayed long enough to be chosen. So tell me, did Edmund deserve to be claimed by his son after everything that happened, or should Julian have made him wait longer? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you love emotional Regency stories filled with stolen letters, hidden children, and powerful family reunions, subscribe for the next story.